Hello, everyone out there. My name is Charo Neville. I'm the curator of the Kamloops Art Gallery. I'm honored to be joined today by Anne-Marie St-Jean Aubre and Jin-me Yoon, along with Scott from Collective Broadcast, who is providing us technical support in the background. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your afternoon with us through this virtual coming together. As we gather across the wires, I'm speaking to you from Kamloops, BC, on the unceded territory of the Kamloops te Secwepemc within Secwepemc Ulu, the ancestral lands of the Secwepemc people. All of this land, what we refer to as Kamloops and beyond, spanning over 180,000 square kilometers across the interior plateau of what we call British Columbia, is Secwepemc Ulu. As a settler, I acknowledge my immense privilege in benefiting from this occupied territory. As I continue my introduction, we're going to situate us visually in the Jin-me Yoon exhibition. And we're sharing here a slideshow of documentation of the exhibition at the Kamloops Art Gallery, which is on until July 2nd. Through our exhibitions and programs at the gallery, we see strength in coming together to amplify Indigenous voices and other historically silenced voices. And we see the importance of having difficult, considered conversations. Programs like today offer frameworks for sharing knowledge and resources and promoting cultural and intellectual exchange and access to art and artists. We're organizing additional online programs in conjunction with the Jin-me Yoon and Robin Hodgson's exhibitions currently on at the gallery. So check out our website as details will be shared soon about our upcoming programs. Today's talk will be about an hour long, and we'll be speaking for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for discussion with the rest of you, questions and answers at the end. So you can submit your questions through the Q&A box, and we'll address these at the end of the presentation. And you're also encouraged to chat amongst yourselves and with us in the chat window below. And just note that you can send a message to all panelists, which will only be visible to us, or all panelists and attendees, which will be visible to everyone who's joining us today. So I'm now happy to share more information about the three of us. I've been curator of the Kamloops Art Gallery since 2011. Where I've developed a program of contemporary, historical, and touring exhibitions along with publications. My curatorial practice supports artists who explore the social and political potential of art. And through projects like the outdoor video projection biennale, Luminosity, which I launched in 2014, I'm also interested in creating opportunities for public art that shift our relationship with urban spaces. Anne-Marie St-Jean Aubre is curator of contemporary art at the Musée d'Art Joliette in Quebec, and her curatorial focus is on issues of identity and culture as explored within contemporary art practices. Since 2017, Anne-Marie has curated contemporary art exhibitions with local, national, and international artists, developing partnerships for touring exhibitions and dance and performance residencies. Her curatorial practice is rooted in a fundamental belief that contemporary art offers a space to learn differently about the world and about important political and social matters affecting our current conditions. And it supports the work of artists sharing this approach. Jin-me Yoon is a Korean-born, Vancouver-based artist. Since the 1990s, her lens-based practice has critically examined the construction of self and other in relation to her own direct and inherited history, as well as within broader geopolitical contexts. Unpacking stereotypical assumptions and dominant discourses, Yoon's work has examined gender and sexuality, culture and ethnicity, citizenship and nationhood. Adopting a wider and wider lens over time, as we'll discuss today, her practice has become a deep investigation into entangled local and global histories existing at specific sites within the context of transnationalism. So welcome to you both. I'll invite Jin-me and Anne-Marie now to turn on their cameras. And here we are. Anne-Marie, do you want to start off the discussion?
Yes. Thank you, Charo, for this great introduction, and nice to see you both again. I'm just back from Kamloops, where we opened the exhibition a couple of days ago, a week ago. And it was such a pleasure to work again with the Kamloops Art Gallery team. That the exhibition is really, it's one of the best iteration of this touring exhibition that started in Joliette in 2019 and has toured through Quebec, mostly first, and then we organized a virtual version of this project with the Carleton University Art Gallery while the pandemic was ongoing, and it was just impossible to present the exhibition physically in their space. So this is the 6th iteration of this project that we toured with Jin-me, and it's really one of the most impressive one, because your space is so incredible with those high ceilings that gives you so much flexibility in terms of scale for the projections of the work, for example. So from the beginning with Jin-me, it was clear that it would be fantastic to show this survey exhibition, this first survey exhibition of Jin-me Yoon in Kamloops, because there's a special relationship between Jin-me and Kamloops. And I thought it would be nice to start with this. The exhibition includes one work from the Kamloops Art Gallery collection that we borrowed for the tour. And there's a series of works, Jin-me, that you've developed in Kamloops. So I think it could be nice for you to start by telling us what brought you to create these works specifically in Kamloops and respond to these landscapes in Kamloops.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure. I want to say that for myself, I'm coming to you from the ancestral and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I am so deeply impressed with the kind of work you're doing in Kamloops, especially in relation to acknowledgements of where you are and the emplacement of talking deeply about our relations to land, and especially indigenous nations and specific nations. So when I was invited to do a residency by Susan Edelstein, who was the curator then in 2003, that was a time when it was 50 years of the ceasefire, the temporary, was supposed to be, technically the two Koreas are still at war, but the ceasefire happened in 1953. So I started to think about that, and not specifically in relation to Kamloops, but I guess as a diasporic person, someone who is from somewhere else and came to what we know as Canada, to Turtle Island. I always carry those histories within my body, and I think they are intergenerationally transmitted, even though I didn't personally go through the Korean War. I was born 7 years after the Korean War. So as I was doing this residency, I started to kind of think about representations of war, and especially to the Korean War, which often gets conflated with the Vietnam War, or just the general stereotypes about popular culture in relation to films, or kind of the Asian other related to martial arts, Bruce Lee, et cetera, et cetera. So I started to also think about gestures and how I could turn the landscapes in what we know as Kamloops into other places that are haunted by both kind of like those mediatized images of what I just previously spoke about. So that's why Kamloops is special to me. That was what, 2003. So a long time ago, a couple decades ago. And I feel very, very supported by the Kamloops Art Gallery. I think it is a beautiful gallery and the team is very beautiful. And I'd like to say thank you to all of you that worked so hard to make this exhibition happen, and also to just express my gratitude generally to say that I am so pleased to be having this iteration of my survey show that Anne-Marie generously curated, and thanks to the Musée de Joliette as well.
And this was the first exhibition after the Joliette first exhibited this tour that you actually got to see in person then.
That's right.
Amazing.
I went to Musée de Joliette in 2019 in July, and it was beautiful. Also a very beautiful museum and generous welcome. And then the pandemic happened, and it's been a kind of like, a ride like everyone else has ridden in terms of the uncertainty. But yeah, it was not possible to travel with the show. I would have enjoyed that, but it wasn't possible. So it's great to actually come with my mother and, my partner and my daughter and my sister last week to open the show and to really celebrate in person. That felt really special. That was great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we appreciate these moments even more now, don't we?
We do. We take them for granted.
I wanted to talk about the body because I feel like you're still here because you're everywhere in the Kamloops Art Gallery now. So when you come up the ramp and it's outside of the exhibition proper, before you enter the gallery doors, you see souvenirs of the self.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was an intentional decision to make what was originally postcards into these big laminated images that are almost to scale with the viewer's body, not quite, but you're very present and you're gazing right at the viewer. And there's 6 of these images right on our open gallery wall. And then, so then you enter the exhibition and then you see the shift of your use of the body over time. The shift away from using your body more recently and using other people, the inclusion of your family, which I know Anne-Marie wanted to speak about. So maybe, well, like for you, now that you have this retrospective and you can look back, what does that, does it seem intentional? Does it seem like your use of your body has changed as you've aged? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think that what's wonderful about having this survey show of 30 plus years of work is that it's kind of terrific as the artist as a maker, to think back on your own work, because times shift and then the work shifts and for me, there's still preoccupations when I think about, if I pull certain threads like the body, there are preoccupations. But I guess the biggest one would be the kind of shift from what I would call the ocular, the eyes, or looking, I should say, more to more of an attention to embodiment, which isn't separate from looking in terms of our senses, but in relation to the camera, and also the gaze. I think in the 90s, there's a lot, and prior, there was a lot of discussions about the gaze. And so one of the effects of being othered through the gaze, let's say in relation to things like racism and sexism, is that you become objectified, you get kind of flattened, you know, the fullness of your humanity is not expressed. So I guess I want to speak back to that gaze, and especially I think the camera has been implicated in the discourses of othering, let's say the discipline of anthropology coincided with the development of photography, those kind of, you know, connections. And so it's a way for me to think about that, address it, but not in a way that's shutting things down, because I think the work keeps opening up because the context changes, and some things don't change, unfortunately, or haven't changed as much as I want. However, now in my work, when I think about the body, I also think about not just the ocular, the surface of the body in which things are projected, but also what it feels like to be inside a body, to be on particular lands, thinking specifically in terms of myself as an immigrant on Indigenous lands, often unceded lands. So that's a big shift. And I use the camera differently. I'm really into experimental camera work, to try to collaborate with the camera, to shake up literally ways in which we could understand how else we could think about seeing and being. So that's kind of a long rambling answer, but I would say that's what it feels like from the inside as an artist, making that work over 30 years. Yeah.
And also focusing on embodiment, you're more and more interested in by sound. The sound quality of your work is also something that you're investing more and more, which means that it's no longer about just looking or being looked at, but it's also about experiencing the work and having the viewer experience it with other means than just the eyes. Maybe you want to talk about that. What interests you with sound? I know you're more and more developing that aspect into your video work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think sound enters the body very differently. And the history of sound, there's not a singular history, but I think music or sound affects you in ways that I think interest me as a full body experience. And also listening has become more and more important. So often when I do my research for my videos, I just kind of open myself up to the various encounters that I have with people, or, you know, even looking at images as I'm doing research. I'm just not looking, I'm kind of trying to listen and also feel the kind of fullness of things. And sound is also, for me, very affective. Not that looking isn't, but I think looking also can bring me back to a more analytical way of thinking, the way I was trained. And that's not bad. I don't binarize affect and, you know, intellect. They're completely connected. But on the other hand, I think the kind of separation isn't the same when you're talking about the modalities of looking and listening, or the camera and, you know, or the audio aspects, right, are very different for me. And so it's really great that I've been able to kind of open myself up to that. And in fact, this weekend, I'm going to be doing a workshop with 24 Korean youth And it's going to involve embodied exercises that I often collaborate with other people. Chi and Kim will take us through, and then I'll be recording various vocalizations with the stethoscope mics, for example. So experimenting what the sound from the inside might sound like, you know. So that's kind of like forms of play. That's what's quite exciting about being an artist and being just kind of an amateur at things too, is that you just get to learn and experiment. That's fun. Yeah.
With the video Other Hauntings, the boy is singing to a rock underwater. Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, there's long stories and histories that go along with my work, but I don't consider myself a documentary maker, and I really deeply appreciate the contribution of other people who have, like journalists or other, activists, writers, filmmakers, what have you, that have already explored those issues. So for me, my way of exploring something like what happened in Kangjang, Maul, the village of Kangjang on Jeju-do, and the destruction of a very sacred lava rock that is sacred to the Henyo and the shamans who work with the Henyo. Henyo are the women divers that dive for edible sea life in a very sustainable way, and have been doing so for a very, very long time. Their livelihoods were destroyed and disrupted by a US-backed Korean naval base. And the activists worked for a long, long time trying to stop this. So when I talk to people, again, I go to the village, and often belatedly after the fact, not in the heat of the moment, because the activists are right there all the time, putting their bodies on the line. I come late, and to hear the stories and the love of the land and the seas, I listen deeply. And one of the stories from one of the activists is that, well, Gurumbi, the rock is still there. The surface is damaged, but it's still there. And that's the work of the other video, is to tell that story mapped onto her body. So anyway, so he sings to the rock. And that song was sung by an activist, Father Moon, and he sings that directly to Gurumbi the rock. And I do that as a poetic gesture, and also as an understanding that there are forces that are alive, that aren't just human, like that aren't just sentient. They're also, it's a kind of deep respect for animism, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Embodiment also was like there's a shift in your work when you start to do this series of crawlings of as it is becoming, where you're no longer trying to represent subject matter that you want to question, but you experience it through your body. The traumas, you want to experience the traumas by pushing yourself into pushing the limits of your body, crawling on the ground, and you're very vulnerable on the streets. So in researching or thinking about embodiment instead of just representation has been there for a long time in your work. It shifted, it transformed, but it's an approach that it's a route that you've taken as early as 2006, 2008, when you did this series of crawlings in Korea and also elsewhere in Japan. Maybe you want to talk about that experience of this work, which is pivotal in the exhibition also.
Yes. I think that work really, again, started in Kamloops when I started working with gesture as a kind of language. I really love dance as well, especially forms of dance that are very much about everyday gestures, you know, and also lots of amazing dance that I did as a youngster, you know, Korean folk dancing. We had to kind of learn that, and I'm kind of glad I did. But yeah, the body has a different way of knowing, and sometimes I think it's not separate from your rational mind, but it kind of understands. It doesn't really lie, you know, in that way. I thought about representation and the way I was trained in Vancouver. And I thought, well, representation can only take me so far. And it's not that I've abandoned it. I still think it's very important. However, what could I say more to this? You kind of run out of, I think the best thing about being an artist, you go inside something and you follow that until the juice is gone. For me, in terms of working in a certain way, I knew I could keep doing it, but because I kind of knew how to do it, but I knew for myself the energy was that I'd explored that. I hadn't finished with it because I still make photographs, obviously of a certain sort, but I had to radically challenge myself to understand embodiment non-ocularly, like through my body. So that's why, and I think the reason why the uses of the body for me and myself aren't necessarily autobiographical. Of course, they're about me and my experiences. As I said, like in terms of souvenirs of the self, going to Banff and people saying "Konnichiwa" to me as if I'm a Japanese tourist, and nothing wrong with that. But you know, I was a Canadian citizen, and of course, very complex histories between Korea and Japan, which get further complicated here in Canada with the Japanese internment, and you know, but living histories of Japanese colonialism that my parents were born into, and had Japanese names and weren't permitted to speak Korean. So these living histories are completely flattened. So in that regard, I just thought, okay, I could keep going down that route, but what does it mean? What does it mean to actually then get inside something? And I don't know. What does that mean? I thought, how do I commemorate things and know things in a different way? And I had to take those chances with my own body, to be frank, because I don't know, you know, it's like, I don't ask my children to do things for me to become something, because I think people should use their own bodies to do what they want. And so that's kind of my ethic. And that's why I got down on the ground. That's why I stood there in front of all those places and souvenirs of the self. And believe me, they look kind of clinical, but they hurt. That work hurt me when I got the rushes back. It's just right under the surface, you know, it's very emotional work for me. So anyway, again, a roundabout answer. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, one of the gifts of being an artist, that you have to pull it out of your body somehow, whether it looks like literal or not. I think most artists that I feel deeply about their work, whether it's using their bodies in a physical or actual literal way, in representation, whatever way it is, when you feel it, at least for myself, I know that they've had some relationship to a kind of deep relationship to pulling it out of themselves. It sounds romantic, but I don't think so. I think that's what process is. Right. So
I think in doing that too, it shifts our experience as the viewer, because it's like what you're describing of this switch from this kind of cognitive or conceptual view of your work, where we're reading a message in clues that you've given us, whereas when you see those monitors on the floor, you experience it in your own body. You feel it, and you hear the rumble of the wheels of the dolly, and you know, you kind of feel a bit scared that those people walking by are going to walk on you, or and it's a disorientation too that happens with the projection upside down, up high.
Right.
So you're asking us as the viewer to embody ourselves as well.
That's very beautiful. Thank you for that.
It's true. I mean, I remember that shift in your work because we were working closely together at that time, and and it was about also that shift of going to Asia, right? Like moving away from this representation of what it means to be Canadian, but also this idea of home and exploring land in a different way.
That's right. That's right.
And I mean, and now land is so essential to your work, I think. That it's almost like more of a character than you or the body to me. Those sites and this idea of trauma being written on the land.
That's right. I think that's very perceptive, and I really appreciate the deep engagement with my work. I'm learning a lot.
I am too. I mean, this show it really does, retrospective is so special in that you get to see it, everything comes together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Anne-Marie has made a real commitment. And I really thank you for that, Anne-Marie. It's deep engagement and very satisfying, you know, and also in terms of moving a shift, I had made videos as a student. However, I think what you said about being in time with the viewer, something different. Photography also deals with time, but it's kind of the gestalt, you know, the whole thing at once, and it has its own kind of generosity in that way, but also its limits with frames for both. We're always thinking about the frame and what's not taken, what's untaken, who doesn't get to represent, etc. All those questions. But I think moving to a durational form was essential to try to touch the things that you were saying that you felt, you know. So it pleases me that that the viewer can literally ride with me that way. You know, it's very satisfying. And retrospectively, many things come into being because I think as artists, we learn through making the work. I think that's the main reason I make work, because I'm curious and I want to learn things. And you're not in control of everything. You have a pretext or a story or feelings or, you know, issues, or how you are responding to your contemporary moment or history, the world. However, I think what the beauty of a survey or retrospective, when you're talking about over 3 decades, is your own relationship to your own work. And it's been a very deep gift to me to have the opportunity to have different iterations, to keep thinking, and to also think alongside with the people who care about my practice, that are in community with my practice, because that's what it means to be in community, right? To care and to be cared for. And I feel a deep cared forness, and that's been really beautiful. And I don't think that excludes critique or difficult discussions, but it's a very different model than, again, the way I was trained, where you take the punches in the face. You know, it can be very different to think through things together, and it's very delightful to me how both of you have engaged, because both of you have been involved now for quite a long time alongside my practice, with your own practices as curators and thinkers.
It's interesting what you said, Charo, about the installation and how the viewer's body is more and more implicated by the work. And it makes me think of scale, because that's also something we discussed a lot with the souvenirs of the self images that were first postcards. The viewer was very implicated because they were sold in tourist shops, so they weren't advertised as art, and it would mean that people would buy it and send it to loved ones as images from where they visited, or like you could actually engage physically with the works. But then when you made them bigger and you suddenly have the almost face-à-face encounter with you in the images, then as a viewer, your body responds to the image very differently. And that's something that we've discussed a lot, because it's a strategy that you used with your other series of postcards with long view, the long view images, which exist as postcards, as a series of photographs, but also you singled out one image that you made very large of the burial mound, where again, the idea was to create a tension between the image and the viewer's body, so that we would feel more implicated by the image. And I think this is something that like has been always there with your work, your sensitivity to scale, and that transform like to respond to the viewer's body, but also scale in the way that you create your images, with how the people in the image in relationship to the landscape where they are situated, their scale in relationship to them, that landscape is also something that transforms through time.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I'll often reuse the image at different scales, because scale is very important to me. I think in a way, those are the tools of the artist. The formal aspects of the work are the work. And I also think you inherit different things in relation to how we view images and art historically, or how we view them on a little screen, or like you say, in a postcard shop. So all the ways that we encounter and live alongside images, or consume them, or make them, are all a part of the work. And I think I think one of the most beautiful things about Kamloops is the scale, like you say, Anne-Marie, was so nice, like the scale of the projections and the intimacy of some of the smaller photographs of, let's say, of my friends and myself and my son on Hornby, and how small they are. And I printed them very, very warm, it's not cool, it's warm tones, because I want to communicate that we're not dominated by nature. It's not like the idea of the sublime in Western art history, where you're just in awe, you're a part of it. Of course we can respect it, but it's not like we're going to be pummeled by it. Although ultimately, ultimately, I think that we're thinking of climate change, obviously, that we need to recognize that we're a part of it, because I think that that's again, a return to the land is learning also deeply from my direct learnings from Indigenous elders that I've encountered in my various projects, and that I continue to work with people like Chief Bill Williams and his son Mark, but also the beautiful Ucluelet elders and the Talaquat elders. I feel like I understand a different way of thinking about land, which isn't to load everything up on Indigenous peoples and say, you know, because it's there in many, many ways, in many traditions too. We just have been out of sync with that, you know, as well. So it has its own subjectivity in one way, because the histories are so part of the land. And that's something that is a part of my research and part of just hearing the stories, but also paying attention and listening and looking closely and slowly, that I try to just touch those various things. It's not like I'm trying to totally understand it or apprehend it or explain it or anything like that. It's like a set of relations that I'm just putting side by side and always positioning myself, because I'm not outside of the telling of it. You know, I don't have an objective view, and I'm always also implicated in my own relation to settler colonialism in Canada and also elsewhere. Who am I in this place? You know, there's always a relation.
I feel like with the Living Time series that you described of the figures, mostly elders, plus your young son in the Hornby Forest that's shot at Helliwell Park.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel like it brings all of these ideas together for me. It's like the connection to the land, also maybe, well, scale, of course, in relation, the small figures in relation to those big trees.
Yeah.
And maybe our irrelevance in relation to nature. That's a big takeaway for me. I just think about how important we think our mortality is in our lifetime, and then just think about the lifetime of those trees. And that you have one of the figure is looking at the viewer, but then like one with the ground, just like how you relate to the ground in your work. It's such a beautiful series. And you're also documenting these elders who will soon be gone, one of whom is already passed, Wayne Gann.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that I was thinking about the constructedness of nature and culture, years of the self. Like, let's say Lake Louise, it's named after, you know, Princess Caroline Alberta, and she's the daughter of Queen Victoria. And I kind of allude to that lake didn't exist until it was discovered, you know, the kind of terra nullius idea that, of course, there are peoples there for time immemorial, the Stony people, Sinnewang peoples. And my sense of even thinking when I was in my early 20s or whenever I made that work, a group of 67, I guess I was 36. And I was, there's 67 people, including myself. And, you know, it didn't occur to me that these elders were going to pass. It was just like, oh, I'm speaking back to Canadian art history, or, you know, not so crudely, because it's more like questioning, right? But I didn't think of that. And now I'm going to be 62 in July. I think about that because my own sense of my own age and time. But yes, I think about temporality all the time. And once you expand a kind of temporality and think about time differently, as like the past and the future and the present, they're all nested into each other, then I think one has the opportunity to perhaps reconsider what we might think is, you know, well, first of all, one can rethink change, you know, like things can change, but also that humans then can be rightfully, in our own mortal lives, can be rightfully put into perspective, and also to honor those that go before us, and to know that, for me, it's not like I'm religious, but I'm saying they're not truly gone, because in fact, everything is still all around us, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's that kind of feeling for me that the scale of time and the way we think of our lives puts me in touch with the possibility of, like I said, reconceptualizing time so that we could think about how we are in the world differently. And I think we need that. And I don't have any answers. I'm not saying this saying like, you know, I know the answer, or I've got some sort of special whatever. No, I'm just an artist. So that's what I'm saying, is that that's one of my preoccupations, actually, and has always been, is time. And I think we are time in a way, but our time is not just our little lives. It's our lives are important too, but it's like Gurumbi. Gurumbi is still alive. The lava rock is still alive. And those trees are much older than even the beloved elders we will lose. And, you know, and even to have my son standing and lying down is hard, because, you know, you don't want to think about your children dying or being mortal, but it's a reality. So I have to embrace that.
Yes, and this is like one of the things that the retrospective and looking at your work through time made so apparent is that how the focus on your life, or the life of your family, or of your community, because Group of 67, it's the community that was around you in Vancouver at that time, is captured through the work. And we see all these people aging through, we recognize the figures, but we see them aging through time, throughout the different projects that you made. And we see the shift slowly towards different perspective on time. So time that, and relationships that are no longer just family relationships or community relationship, but relationship to place and to nature also. And so thinking about time in another way, as you just described. And this, I find that the retrospective, looking at your work through 30 years of work, almost 30 years of work, shows that very, very, very much, and changed at least my perspective of your work, because suddenly these earlier projects that seemed very conceptual become, there's an affective tone that gets added to the works, because we see these people aging through your work. So it definitely, I find that this is one of the powerful thing of the exhibition for me. And I know that it's a conversation that we had together while we were making these choices, but this definitely something that made sense with this project.
Well, my father passed in 2019, and he's in obviously a Group of 67, and I made this work in 2017, Longview, which isn't in the Kamloops show, the photographs are, and also in Turn. But I'm really happy I have that, you know, like I am glad that I marked his presence, and he's everywhere now. I don't think matter ever gets destroyed, you know. Maybe he's in my cup of tea in the sense everything is around. But I think that embracing that relationship to our own mortality and to time is an essential part of understanding that life and death are connected, and that's the cycles in nature. And to deny that is just I don't know. I think that it causes a warped perspective. And aging also too is a process that I think is kind of liberating in a way. I really take my role, like when you turn 60 in Korean, you become an elder. It's Shawangap, it's your fifth cycle through the lunar zodiac. So, you know, a lot of people didn't live till they were 60 in Korean history. It's a ripe old age. So now, of course, it's not in the same way in developed countries, or, you know, where you have healthcare and nutrition, etc. But and not uniformly. But I'm saying that I just feel like, yeah, it's something that I want to keep exploring. And not specifically as an issue, it's just a part of everything, you know, part of everything. And it's a kind of freedom too, I think, once you realize that you're just part of everything.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of like a very flaky, but it's not. And I don't consider it like the conceptual or so-called conceptual. I think for me was also deeply emotional. It's just that the strategies are different because my focus is on more representation and inheriting representations that are very limiting in terms of their relationship to a more full and inclusive understanding of worlds and histories, right? So now it's just, I don't feel particularly compelled to make the same statements over and over again. I think others are doing it. And I think it's fun to play with those things as well. Like, you know, I've made some pretty kind of cheeky, unruly works of late too, you know, which I enjoy. It's not trying to be oppositional. It's just a lot of fun to kind of take those things apart and then scramble them all up. It's the Joker in me.
I'm seeing that we're approaching 3, so I just wanted to be sure to invite anyone out there listening to add any questions that you might have for us to the Q&A. There aren't any yet, so we can just carry on talking for a few minutes and see if anyone has anything that they want to ask. We've covered everything now, I think. Life, death, land, time.
Thinking that this is where we're going to go, but it's fun. It's nice. And, you know, I am so, I think that is one of the best things about being an artist is that you can still have a new relationship to your work, you know, and then it kind of spurns on new work. And I'm so excited. I'm inside a lot of new works and there's energy there for it, you know, like in the sense that I feel like, yeah, there's so much. It's such a difficult time right now that we're living through, yet such a kind of, I don't know what to say. I don't think it's necessarily inspirational. It's something, it's in a kind of an intensity that asks you to be inside of it and respond, you know, and lots of good stuff happening alongside the terrible stuff too, I have to say. A lot of people who are coming together and good stuff, not just bad stuff.
Do you actually have a question now? From Lynn Richards, who lives in Kamloops. She'll actually be writing a short review of the exhibition.
Okay. Terrific.
Yeah.
Hello, Lynn.
Hello, Jin-me. I'm curious about your choice to place subjects in a recumbent position in the second of each of the diptych in the living times degrees. So expanding on what we were talking about.
Yeah. I think that came to me as a kind of gesture of, I've been traveling for about 10 years on the ground, and being close to the ground like that, you have a totally different perspective of things. I learned a lot because I did that in many places, actually right now at the Vancouver Art Gallery, there's a show called Restless, and those there's videos of me moving around like that horizontally in the streets of Seoul that are in the show here, but presented quite differently. And then another show that I'm in at my home department, the School for the Contemporary Arts at SFU, where I dusted off a 2010 piece of me crawling around the Vancouver Art Gallery during the Olympics.
That's right.
Yeah. So I learned from that. And then I thought, what does it mean to have that relationship with in a place where it's not urban, it's not, mostly I was doing this in urban places. And what does it mean to just a simple gesture? Because my work is often quite simple, because I love that crystalline, like if I was a writer, I'd be a poet, I love that kind of and let the economy of something then resonate out. So standing up suggests certain things, and verticality suggests certain things. And when you lie down, especially on the earth in the forest floor, there's a kind of relationship to being close and touching the earth, but also being like very profoundly influenced by the amount of humus, am I saying that right? Anyway, the stuff on the ground floor that, like banana slugs and so many creatures have such an incredible role in breaking down, like big trees that's what and we become that too, whether we're literally buried or not. And so the people that were the friends that laid on the ground, one of the comments was, I never laid on the ground like that, in the same way. You might have a picnic blanket or you might be on a beach, but on the forest floor, just laying down. And it was good, and they enjoyed it. So it's about time, our own mortality, but just being close to the ground, all that stuff. There's not one specific meaning, but I think it took us 10,000 years to stand up as Homo sapiens. So, to lie down once in a while, to consider what that might mean, I think is worth it. Everyone should give it a go. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's exactly kind of succinct enough, but it's, I think that's the way art works. It touches on different things and it's associative. So
I feel like you can almost smell the ground when you're looking at those images.
Oh, yeah.
Really, and knowing that the ocean is so close to, and just the smell.
Yeah, and also, that place very well, Charles. So, tell you well that it's near Flora Island, and you can hear the sea lions barking, and you can hear that in my video, Living Time. And people say, "Oh, did you drop that sound?" And I said, "No, it's right in the forest. You hear it, and you hear the raven, and you hear the eagles, and yeah, it's a part of the soundscape. It's a part of the smell. It's a part of being kind of like right there in a place." Yeah.
And water is also so present now in your work. So the like forests, the trees, the water, the sea, and also the air, which was there from the beginning with between departure and arrival, where you film from the airplane, the clouds. So meaning different things, but you were also always very attentive to these natural elements that are fundamental to life, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I feel very grateful. And I think there is an urgency right now to attending to many of the ways that we, it's so unfortunate that we were the poster child of climate change, but you really, the embodiment of that is more and more apparent. So it's important.
Jimmy, I don't know if you know Andrew Booth, but he has written not a question necessarily, but congratulations on the long overdue recognition with being shortlisted for the Scotiabank Photography Award. And that's coming up for you.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Toronto on the 16th. They'll announce it. And, you know, it's just an honor. All the artists, yeah, it's amazing to be in association with so many good artists in Canada and elsewhere. I feel really lucky to have made a life of this in a way. You know, it's kind of like a privilege, and it's difficult. I mean, especially for a lot of artists, and materially difficult. I mean, I was fortunate enough to teach, but it's still, I think, just the process of being so inside of something and keep doing that it's been pretty amazing. And so thank you. Thank you.
And you have an exhibition, a solo exhibition coming up at the Vancouver Art Gallery in the fall. And
Yes.
a publication. Yeah,
recent works the last 10 years. And yeah, it's very, yeah, I feel fortunate right now to have, you know, people attending to my practice. So it feels good. And yeah, it's just good to share my work and also support other people making their work and be in conversation, and to also have a place where it's not just completely restricted to the art community, you know, to expand out to other communities. I love working with, I've loved mentoring and working with students, and also outside of institutions, working with Korean youth and trying to really foreground our relationship as children of immigrants or immigrants ourselves. What does it mean to be in a relationship with the intention of reparation to Indigenous peoples, and a different relationship to land in terms of thinking about our planetary, you know, shared planetary wellness, or how to come to terms with the devastation that we're going through in terms of, you know, our world and our earth and seas. So that gives me a lot of purpose. Not that I have any answers, or not even, you know, well versed in it per se, but just learning alongside and having a sense that we're doing things beside each other. And I think that's good. And I want to be honest about that and have good conversations, the right intentions, but also not be too evasive, to just directly deal with things, you know, call things what they are, in order to come together and work on them together. And I know it's very idealistic, but I figure, why not? Too late now. I've never.
Why not?
I should be more cool and cynical, but
no. 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 Anne-Marie, do you have any other questions or thoughts? I'm just realizing we're after 3 now, so
maybe a last little thing. It feels like it's such a great moment for your practice. Also, you're creating a lot of new works, and it feels like you're in a good moment where you have time to spend on creating works, and you're also very engaged in new possibilities, exploring new possibilities with the workshops that you're developing with Korean youth, but also the research you were doing in Korea that you might continue soon. Maybe it'd be nice to just hear about one project that you're working on right now that you'd like to share a little bit, where you're going with your current research.
Well, just really immediately I'm working like this month on a project called Long Time So Long, and it's situated at the Iona Regional Park, which is a former, there's a sewage plant, and it's close to the Richmond Airport, and it's also an amazing place for birds, over 300 kinds of birds. And I'll be shooting there, and I'm developing a project where, with, like I said, a sound project in which I'll be then recording the youth who've just done a workshop on thinking about coming through a kind of moment of intense East Asian racism and how to, I guess, soothe oneself and be present in one's body in strength. And then using those tones of what Jian is developing, because she's trained. And then there'll be a big installation at Evergreen. There's sculptural aspects. And then another future project I want to do is near the ZMZ, and thinking about how to think through politics and ecological issues by thinking through animals, and particular birds and cranes, because there's a history of some stories that really inspire me about cooperation between North and South Korea and other countries, trying to bring back the cranes. So anyway, it's all very interesting and fun, and also I wanted to take this moment to say my work really can't be done without other people. I've always worked with photographers because I'm in the shots myself, but also often I'm in a directorial role. So all the people that have worked with me in the past, often who are attached to institutions, and they're so talented themselves. But right now I have a fantastic group of people that help me. And I don't think I could do their work, my work, without them. So, you know, they kind of get trapped. Like Ian Barber, who is a very talented cinematographer and a filmmaker. He helps me all the time in the studio and shooting the work, and we sit alongside. He has incredible editing skills, and yeah, very good with sound, and we sit together and we work. And Rachel Topham, who makes the photographs, often she'll be shooting the works, and Aya Garcia, another person I work with, Sharon Canoff, who produces the work and helps me. So, you know, for me, it's a good moment, partially because I have these incredible supports. Like it's kind of like certain artists do work very alone, but I think the truth of it is many artists work with other people who make their work possible. So I want to acknowledge that right now, and also acknowledge both of you who have been staunch supporters, and that gives me energy to continue on too. That it's not about me, but it's about caring for practices and having discussions and having opportunities to share my work. And you know, I'm just grateful for it. So thank you. And thank you everybody who was out there in Zoom land. It's kind of strange not to.
A very nice hello from Tanya Willard, and now just one from Elizabeth McKenzie.
Oh, yes. Oh, both and
incredible
people I admire so much. Tanya and Elizabeth. I just feel really
and
great.
Rachel Topham. Everybody's giving big hugs now.
Oh, yeah. No, and thank you everybody for joining in.
Yeah, really.
Who's out there and whoever listens to this after.
Yeah, we will have the recording available in the coming days on our website. So if you wanted to share it with anyone or watch it again. And then your exhibition here, Elsewhere Other Hauntings, is on until July 2nd. So if you want to make a road trip to Kamloops, or if you live here, come often. We also have an exhibition of Robin Hodgson's work in the Cube on until June 18th. And there will be other programming coming your way. Any final words from you two?
Thank you.
Been so nice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both. And thank you for the excellent programming, Emily, and everyone that's going to contribute to that. It's great to meet Robin too. So
Yeah.
good feelings all around. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.